Well, let me tell you something, brother.
Snort, snort, snort.
Hogan. Drip.
Snort, snort.
I got the drip. Go.
So you get all these things, and I'm like, and then you go online, and all you see, right, is, oh, first person indie. Oh, it's terrible. First person. Who wants first person Indiana Jones? It should have been third person, man. They really ruined it by making it first person. And I just can't stand it. I can't stand people bitching for the sake of bitching. You didn't play it. You don't know if it's any f***ing good. The preview looked good.
I know that one of the primary traits of a lolcow is the fact that they have no self-awareness, but DSP's lack of self-awareness is always so shocking to me because it's so obvious to everybody but him. He says that he's tired of people just bitching to bitch, but like, that's really all you do. This is one of those segments where you just continue to complain yourself. So you're really no better than these people. And I'm not surprised that people are upset that it's a first-person Indiana Jones game. I'm personally not, but I know that a lot of people think that when you use a popular IP like Indiana Jones and you're going to play as the titular character, Indiana Jones, that you would want it to be in third person so that you can see the character at all times because he is the focal point of the game. And for some people, if they can't see the character and they're instead in first person, you might as well not be playing the character because at the end of the day, it's just their voice and their arms. And that's before we even address that some people just don't even play first person games because they're in first person. He's never really enjoyed playing games where the camera view was first person. He's always been a third person kind of gamer. And for other people, it makes them motion sick to be in first person just about every time. So DSP, just because you think the game looks good doesn't mean that it's going to suit every gamer, and those gamers are allowed to be upset that they now have a game that they would like to play and can't because of their own personal preference. But how ironic is it that he wants to complain about Baldur's Gate 3 nonstop, about every single mechanic that he doesn't want to engage with and that he's too stupid to understand, even though most of them he could completely ignore and just tough through the game like that brute force style. And he expects you to respect that and allow him his criticism. But when it comes to other people complaining about a game because of its camera choice, you know, that thing that will affect your entire gameplay at all times and you cannot escape, yeah, that's stupid. You're not supposed to do that. You should just shut your mouth because DSP said the preview looked good. So obviously you're not allowed to criticize it. Sound good? Sounds good to me. And by the way, cat agrees.
You don't get to just shit on something because you're bored. Because that's all it is. People today are so bored with their lives that whenever something gets announced, they just have to take a shit on it now, right? Like, oh, I've been waiting for this Xbox Direct so I could pull down my pants and launch projectile turds at it. Well, grow the f*** up because no one gives about your shit.
Did he just say no one gives about your freaking shit? I'm gonna run it back.
Well, grow the f*** up because no one gives about your shit.
Yeah, he totally did. But again, it's like DSP doesn't know who he is, what he constantly does on the internet, because all he does is complain. All he does is bitch about everything in every video game and blame the game and the devs the whole time. He's talking about people trying to complain about everything under the sun when that's exactly what he does, dude. And I definitely don't need to be told to grow up by a man who's talking about pulling down their pants and launching projectile turds. What are you, 6 years old, dude? And I know you all know this is a regular occurrence for DSP. He is always talking about turds this, scat that, shit this. He was just talking the other day about clinging Delirium Studios testes. The guy just has no room to tell other people to grow up when these are the things that he's saying on a regular basis. Especially when he's the one who's LARPing as an adult at all times and only going out of his way to do things that he thinks that other adults do because he thinks that other adults do them.
Bitching on social media about this shit. It's like, could you shut the f*** up about it? It doesn't look bad. It doesn't look like the best game I've ever seen, but I didn't see anything that looked bad about it. You know, I'm sorry. It looks interesting. Indiana Jones in first person with unique combat elements, the likes of which we haven't really seen before in a game like this, right?
I mean, I went and watched the preview specifically so that I could talk about this video, and the combat looked like the worst part in all honesty. I don't know if it's just because it was a preview or it was the person playing, but it looked incredibly slow and it looked like you would see the same animations about 100 times in a row. I mean, how many times can you whip an enemy and make them fall over or steal their gun or something before you're kind of like, yeah, I've seen this before. I mean, hey, maybe the game will be great and it's just not for me, or I'm getting the wrong impression from the preview, but to sit here and say that the game looks great and there's nothing wrong with it and it's super unique and interesting, like, I'm just not sold like you are, DSP, and I don't know why you are, when you're typically the guy who is hating on everything, especially when it comes to video games.
And it's made by a company that's made multiple great games from the Wolfenstein series. Yeah, the last one wasn't good. What was it, the one with the twin daughters or whatever? That one sucked. But most of the games they put out are good. So why are we bitching? Oh, by the way, it's a Game Pass game, right? And it's coming out this year, but it just said 2024. This one actually didn't have like a solid release date. It was just like, oh, it's coming out this year. That's the target for this year, right? So I don't know. To me, it's like people just want to, okay. So AVGN, I know I reference him every once in a while. The Angry Video Game Nerd used to have this saying he said in one of his videos, classic videos. There's nitpicking and then there's shitpicking, right? Like, you can nitpick, but this is just like people are looking for things to shit on. Like, you're literally looking to say it's bad when it's not bad. You just want to shit on it.
Who are you to draw the line on what is nitpicking and shitpicking though, DSP? Because you are the person who likes to complain just to complain. It's really a multi-purpose tool for you. It fills the dead air because you're not funny and can't think of anything original, and it's a great excuse as to why you're bad at video games, and it saves your ego. But he's saying that people are looking for things to complain about, and the only example that he has given is the first-person camera perspective criticism that people are throwing at it. That seems like a pretty valid criticism to me, DSP. Criticizing the camera choice of a video game is a pretty major part of the video game, and if it's not for you, then that seems like something that you might want to complain about. I mean, if they made the next Elder Scrolls or Fallout game third person only, I wouldn't even bother playing it.
And that pisses me off because I'm watching this direct and I'm like feeling positive about most of it. Like I said, the Civ game Aura, I don't care about, right? I just don't give a shit. And I'm looking and I'm like, okay, Avowed looks pretty good. It doesn't look amazing, groundbreaking, but it looks like it's going to be a great time. Hellblade 2 looks like pretty good. I actually was pleased with Visions of Mana. And the indie game looks pretty good. And most of these games are going to be on Game Pass. So likely, at the very least, I'm at least going to check them out, right? And then I go online, and all the people online are doing is bitching and complaining that they hated it. Well, fuck you. Really? Are you gamers, or are you fucking little whiny bitches?
Well, DSP, having met quite a few gamers in my lifetime, I'm gonna have to go with the latter, actually. Gamers tend to be very opinionated and passionate about the hobby that they've decided to spend a huge amount of time and money on. And it very much can be a toxic cesspool when it comes to discussing any sort of media. But I don't know why this is surprising to you given how long you've been in the space for. Not to mention the countless amount of videos and streams that you've done on these events where you did nothing but complain about every game that was shown and bitch about the devs and complain about the publishers the entire time. It's actually very strange to me that you walked away with a positive attitude from one of these events for once, because usually you're the first person to come back and tell everybody that you hated everything and it was uninteresting, boring, everybody on camera sucked, and every game looked stupid and woke.
Shut the fuck up. No one cares about you sitting bitching on X app about fucking, oh, it didn't look like this, it didn't play exactly like I had expected, and this and that. Then why don't you go fucking make the game? Serious, I'm tired of these fucking entitled idiots just bitching about everything.
But DSP, that same take can be levied right back at you when it comes to Baldur's Gate 3. You have all of these complaints about the game, all of these things that you find as shortcomings for the game, even though other people don't have these problems, but that's unrelated. If you really feel that way about the game, why don't you go make a better game, DSP? Why don't you go make the game that you think Baldur's Gate 3 should have been? If it's so easy, if you have all of these great ideas about how the game should have been, and you do the same thing when it comes to everybody else's business but your own. You have all of these great ideas in what everybody else should have been doing, and they would have made all of this money, and everybody else is an idiot because they're making business decisions that you wouldn't have made. But then when you look at your own business decisions, you can clearly see that you operate your business like a clown.
I guess I'm becoming the older gamer generation is what it is. You know, when I was growing up and when new games were announced, yeah, you would try to micro-analyze, of course, but you didn't just crap on stuff constantly just because you thought it was fun to do. Oh, because you're online, you have a fucking ability to post up a shitty opinion, you just do it, right? Because now I feel like there was a hype around it, and the event's over, and I'm feeling positive and good, and I go online, and everyone's like, ah, this sucked, it sucked, it sucked. Now, do you have concrete reasons why it sucked, or are you just echoing what everyone else is saying online to have a memeable moment of how it sucked, right? It's like, shut the fuck up. Stop being a sheep, and look at it for what it was. 5 games, out of which 4 of which I'm actually interested in, all of which will be Game Pass, except for Visions of Mana, and they're all coming out this year. That's great that now we have time to talk about these games and hype them up and learn more about them, and they're going to be playable soon.
So because DSP is interested in these games and he wants to hype them up for his stream, you're not allowed to have any sort of criticism about them. That's exactly what he just said. And I love that he wants to talk about how back in his day, nobody just complained about everything just to complain, and that they had valid criticisms, but they were being fair, or whatever he was trying to get across. But he built his entire reputation on being the king of hate, where he was just nonstop toxic and negative to everything and everyone pretty much at all times. And he stole his entire shtick from Angry Video Game Nerd. And I'm sure you can imagine his whole thing was being an angry video game nerd. And I'm still waiting to hear another example of a criticism that was levied at the game that DSP doesn't think is fair and is unjustified. Because again, the only one that he pointed out was that people were upset about the camera style choice. I don't know how he has the audacity to get on his stream and then tell everybody who has an issue with the camera choice that they've made that they're just being sheeple and going with the herd. That's why I think it's personally a crime that DSP has pretty much banned every dissenting opinion in his chat, because nobody is going to ask him for more example, because they know if they do, they're gonna get banned and they're gonna have to make a new sock account.
And these are mostly games from Xbox Studios, and the big question has been, will Xbox Studios ever put out good games? Well, Avowed looks pretty good, Hellblade 2 looks pretty good, the indie game looks pretty good. So right there's, wow, maybe finally the first signs of hope that all the money Xbox invested in these game studios is going to pay out for them, right? So why exactly are we shitting? Why are we all taking a shit? I'm curious, right? I don't know. It makes me pissed off because, you know, these game devs are probably working really hard to make great games too. And they worked hard on this presentation to make everything look good. And the first thing they do is go online and people are just making negative memes. Indian's first person is banned. Shut the f up.
Oh, all of a sudden we care about how the devs feel and all of the hard work that they put into their games? Where was that care over the past 13 years since you've been a full-time content creator? You know, when you were outright blaming every single dev for every single game that you played because you thought that that was valid criticism? You told them numerous times that they should all go find new jobs because they suck at theirs and they're pieces of shit and all sorts of other heinous things. Yeah, where was all that care then, DSP? Or is that one of your new recent improvements that you've been making to your content? You're pretending like you care about the devs and how much work they put in. You really can't count on DSP to be consistent in any facet. Well, aside from being consistently stupid every day and having the worst takes on the planet.
They sound like little kids whining about nothing because they're so entitled, right? Yet then they go off, and what's the first thing they'll do? They'll go play Fortnite, right? Or they'll go play the next memeable stupid game that zero effort went into. That's what they'll go play. But then they'll crap on the games that are actually trying to do something original or interesting or different, right?
So it's okay for DSP to dog on other games that he doesn't like, but heaven forbid that you complain about a game that he's even remotely interested in, even though he's never played it and really doesn't know anything about it. And it's totally disingenuous to say that no effort went into these memeable games, when the reality is a ton of passion and effort went into a lot of these viral games that people have been playing online. DSP is just salty because he doesn't know what fun is when it comes to playing video games, and a lot of them require friends to have fun playing with, and he just doesn't have that either. And it's ironic that DSP is complaining about game studios not putting effort into their memeable games that people enjoy, when he is pretty much the king of not putting in any effort to his content whatsoever. And we'll try and be fair to DSP and say, sure, he tries on his gaming streams, but what about the other 2 channels that he has? DSP reacts as him literally sitting there and watching other people's content with little to no commentary whatsoever, and when he does decide to say something, it's never interesting or funny, and instead very boring. boring. And DSP throwbacks, that's a whole different can of worms. It's actually a channel that is entirely AI upscaled playthroughs that he's already done. And the best part is he didn't even AI upscale the video himself. He has a dent doing it for him. So the only thing that he really has to do at all is upload the video for the dent sends him back a video, and then he uploads that. That's the entire process for DSP, because he doesn't make his own thumbnails, and I'm convinced he doesn't make his own titles either. No, but DSP, you're totally right. The companies that made Among Us, Fall Guys, Pizza Tower, and Fortnite totally didn't put in any effort. Unlike you, who is obviously full of talent and a complete workhorse. He's got the best work ethic on YouTube, dude.
So, yeah, it pisses me off. And the thing is, if you have a legit reason to criticize any of those games during that event and you think that they don't look good, that's fine. What I'm telling you is I didn't see that. What I saw was just the same regurgitated negativity on social media, and I'm tired of seeing that everyone's just a parrot, everyone's just a sheep. They just follow each other by the ass. It's like the world's longest human centipede, right? They're all attached by the fucking anus to the mouth, and they can't stop shitting into each other's mouths so that the next one can shit into the next one's mouth, and they make the biggest, longest turd you've ever seen that goes on social media. Now everyone thinks that this presentation sucked. No, it didn't. It didn't suck. It wasn't the best I've ever seen, but it certainly wasn't the worst presentation. So shut the fuck up and eat shit.
Wasn't this the guy that told us that we needed to grow up? And he's over here talking about human centipede, anus to mouth? I won't lie, I thought about cutting out that whole little segment there because I thought it was completely unnecessary, but I think it captures something special about the guy. The fact that he can't refrain from making a scat joke to save his life. That's pretty much all he can think about all of the time. I mean, his audience loves scat, dude. They think it's the funniest thing on the planet. I think the true problem here is that DSP needs to get off of social media if he's not interested in the toxicity that pretty much just is social media at this point. But of course, he can't do that, because how else would he get headlines to read on DSPN? That's clearly a vital piece of content that the dents cannot go without. But he says if you have a legit reason to critique the 5 games that were shown during the Xbox Direct, that's totally fine. If you think that they don't look good, that's totally cool, dude. But then quickly goes on to say that that's not how he felt about it, so therefore you're stupid and wrong. Because we all know that DSP is the arbiter for what is and isn't any good. Sound good? Sounds good to me. And by the way, God agrees.
I know that was gross. That was the intention. That's how these people make me feel. Disgusting. Anyway, there we go. Let's continue now, shall we? Let's continue with the show. So that was the digital event. I'm feeling positive about a lot of these games, and yes, I'm excited for some of them, and I'm going to be playing most of them. Anything that's on Game Pass, besides that Aura game, I'll probably at least try out, if not do a playthrough of. So there you go.
Yeah, DSP, positivity is definitely the emotion that you're giving off in this segment. It's totally not negative scumbag who can't allow people to share their thoughts and feelings on a piece of media. No, it's definitely positivity.
Good stuff, and thank you for listening to my bitching and my whining. Nice hypocritical, right? But then again, you did tune into my show to hear that. So, you actively chose to listen, as opposed to me just spewing my nonsense on social media, which I don't even do, right? I think that's a big difference, too. Like, you know that when you come to the Level 1 podcast, you're going to get my honest opinions about this kind of stuff, so you come here because you're interested in my opinion. It's not just me spewing my toxic shit all over the fucking social media platform just for the sake of being a part of a bunch of people who want to be toxic together, right? It's a little different. Okay.
There is absolutely no difference between what you do and what you are claiming that they do. Because as much as you like to pretend that YouTube is not a social media platform, it absolutely is. And they could say the exact same thing about their tweets on Twitter. That you know when you read their tweets that you're gonna get their full, honest, unadulterated opinion on anything, and you have decided that you are going to read their posts and their comments. It's just amazing to me that everything that DSP says could immediately be turned right back around on him, and he never realizes that. And if this is something that you can keep doing, if you can consistently turn around DSP's arguments right back on him, I'm willing to say that he doesn't have a valid argument. It's almost like everything he says is a huge waste of time and doesn't actually mean anything. But Indiana Jones isn't the only game that DSP has been toxic about recently. Oh no, we got mention of Mortal Kombat 1 again, and DSP obviously had to go in and defend Street Fighter 6. I believe this goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. This is obviously a double feature, and thanks to Doody Doody streams for the clip. I really appreciate it, brother. Thank you so much.
I recently saw the best-selling games of last year. Mortal Kombat 1 actually outsold Street Fighter 6. From what you said, I would have thought that Mortal Kombat 1 was a fail, but I guess more people like it than Street Fighter. Why do you think that is? I'm not trying to be mean or annoying. I just want your real opinion. Thanks for the content and the vids. Here's the difference in which a lot of people don't seem to understand. Sales do not equate to quality in any way, shape, or form. What's the best-selling game of almost every year? Call of Duty. Do you think Call of Duty is the best game every year? What's like the second or third best-selling game every year? Madden. Yeah, I'm not kidding. Madden. Is Madden the best game every year? Does people even talk about it outside of its own circle? No.
And this has got to be one of those rare times where I unfortunately have to agree with DSP. I don't think that sales number are a direct reflection of the quality of a game. A game can be the best selling of the year, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it is the best game of the year. And while I firmly believe in this stance and will stand on this for the rest of my life, DSP is actually contradicting something that he said very recently.
Did you know, I gotta say this in my Game of the Year awards. It doesn't matter how many of you hate on this game, Hogwarts Legacy is the best-selling video game of 2023. It sold over 22 million copies. That's more than Call of Duty. That's more than any Grand Theft Auto. It sold more than anything. It doesn't matter what the games media says. It doesn't matter what the leftist mob says. It doesn't matter at all. This game was a sales dynamo, and more people played this game this year than any other game that was purchased. Okay? The numbers speak for themselves. Potter is alive and well. The difference here is hype and mainstream appeal versus actual quality. All right? If you want an apples-to-apples comparison of Street Fighter 6 and Mortal Kombat, okay? Visually, you can argue they both look great. I personally think Street Fighter 6's graphical style is better. You might disagree and say that Mortal Kombat's better. That's a personal preference, but they both look good. Okay?
So now that he has to defend Street Fighter 6 directly against Mortal Kombat 1, the graphical style and presentation of Street Fighter 6 is entirely a preference, dude. But your preference for a first or third person camera in the Indiana Jones game is ludicrous, and you should just quit complaining online.
How do they play? Street Fighter 6 has tons of new gameplay elements and is an incredibly complex engine. It's easy to jump into and hard to master. It's great. Mortal Kombat 1 is a simpleton's game engine. It's just on paper. This is not me, in my opinion. This is just facts. It's an easy mode game engine. There's not much to it. It's not complex. All right. They basically made it, the only variable is the assist characters. I can't remember what they're called, right? It's basically the whole game is based on those assists that come in. Because outside of that, it plays just like the same as all the previous Mortal Kombats. In fact, they removed elements from the last one that made it better and made it even more simple to play. As a competitive game, it doesn't hold water. It doesn't. It's not balanced well. A lot of those assist characters are just broken. And the entire game is based on an idea of mixing you up, meaning you don't know how to block properly, so they can land a combo and do giant damage.
So when talking about a fighting game, DSP just thinks that it's a net positive that the game is more complicated, that the engine is just more sophisticated and complex. And he very quickly writes off MK1 as being a simpleton's game that doesn't actually have any sort of complexity in it whatsoever. You'd think if it were so simple that he'd be significantly better at it, but that's obviously just not the case, and why he wound up rage quitting from the game to begin with. Which is of course made infinitely funnier when you remember that he not only bought the special edition of MK1, but he also bought an entirely new fight stick so that he could play fighting games on the PS5. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that he rebought Street Fighter 6 on the PS5 just so that all of his fighting games were on one console, as if that actually mattered. But it is strange to me that DSP is praising complexity as a good thing, given all of the hate that he's thrown at Baldur's Gate 3 recently. I feel like every time he plays the game, he opens up the level 1 pre-stream talking about how complicated the game is and how he wouldn't be having any fun with it if he wasn't being handheld the whole time, because it's just too hard, dude. He can't enjoy the game. But of course, when it comes to Street Fighter 6, because that's the franchise that he loves to death, it's totally okay and passable and far better for it. And whenever he talks about fighting games, I always notice that he's constantly talking about what is and isn't competitively viable. I understand that he's a former professional Street Fighter player. Not everything actually has to have a competitive scene. In fact, I think that a lot of games that don't have competitive scenes are better for it, because I've personally experienced video games turning into absolute trash because they were trying to cater towards a competitive scene. I'm a firm believer that if you focus on the fun of the game before you focus on it being competitively viable, the competitive scene just kind of forms around the game. Halo 3 didn't need a slew of patches to patch every single gun and make them all competitively viable. That's not something that happened. Players just really enjoyed playing the game because they thought it was fun, and because they played it so much, they decided that they wanted to play more competitively and be better than other players.
The problem is, and this is the third factor, the online play. They are not even close to being equivalent. Street Fighter 6 is way better than Mortal Kombat 1. When you go to play online, Mortal Kombat 1 frequently has awful connections of around 100 milliseconds or higher. That's not competitively viable. And when you have a game that the entire game is based on recognizing what's going on and either blocking high or low, and if you can't do that, you die, the game sucks online. All right?
But DSP, I thought one of the excuses that you used to cope in Street Fighter 6 was that a low ping was actually a detriment. That having a higher ping benefited you because of the online lag. But when it comes to MK1, the exact opposite is true. The high ping is the problem. I mean, obviously, everyone knows that high ping is a problem in online games. Low ping is never an issue and something that DSP made up. But it's just another example of him flip-flopping because he decided to make up an excuse as to why he was getting his ass beat on Street Fighter 6 one night.
Now, outside of that, what other content does it have? Well, each game had a unique single-player mode. You know, Mortal Kombat had a story mode and also had, what was it called? It's not the crypt, it's whatever they call it in this one. I've already forgotten what it's called, but it's got its own board game style mode. Street Fighter 6 has its own World Tour mode, which has a story also tying in with creating your own character and going through this and playing for 20, 30 hours. So each game has viable content, all right, for people who aren't necessarily competitive, but want to just do more casual stuff and have single player content. That's in there too.
And this might be my bias against Street Fighter showing, but the World Tour mode for Street Fighter 6 genuinely strikes me as one of those games that you see actors playing in a movie that doesn't actually exist. It just looks so generic, I find it difficult to believe that it's real. But he's directly comparing these two games, and really didn't even acknowledge the fact that Mortal Kombat 1 not only has an actual story mode with real cutscenes and voice acting and interesting fights in between that tie into the story, but also an entirely different mode that you can continue to play in single player that adds variety and challenges and unlocks. Again, maybe it's just my bias showing, but I really don't see how Street Fighter 6's generic ass World Tour mode even compares.
All right, but if you're literally going apples to apples, Street Fighter 6 absolutely is the better game than Mortal Kombat 1, for sure. All right, and what's funny is, if you take a look at player retention, all right, Street Fighter 6, yeah, they lost a lot of players over time. They're going to. It's 7 months in. But compare that to Mortal Kombat 1 within 3 months lost the vast majority of its player base. People bought it, played through the single player modes, did a little bit of online, said meh, and moved on. Street Fighter 6, a lot of people got hooked and are still playing it competitively today. That's the difference, right?
I'm gonna have to concede this point to DSP because I don't actually know what the numbers are for either game. What I do want to point out is that he says this very confidently without actually citing any sources or pointing out any specific numbers or statistics at all. So while I'm not willing to directly disagree with him on this exact point, I really can't validate anything that he's saying either because he doesn't give us anything to go off of. It's just whatever he says. But that's pretty much exactly what he wants on his streams. He doesn't want to provide any sources. He doesn't want to show you why he says the things that he says. You're just supposed to believe him all of the time. And if you don't, you're just a damn dirty detractor who needs to get sent to ban world.
So then you might say, well, I don't get it. Why did Mortal Kombat 1 sell so much more than Street Fighter 6, right? It's very simple. Hype. And, let's be honest, people don't buy games for quality. They buy it for silly reasons. In the 1990s, Mortal Kombat in the United States was more popular than Street Fighter. Why? Gore. Because of the gore. Literally the only reason. It didn't play better. It didn't have a better cast of characters. It's because you could rip someone's arms off and shove them up their dick hole. It's because you could, you know, take their feet and shove them in their ears and clap their head and brains would splatter all over the camera. Right? You could take their dick and rip it off. All right, now I'm getting a little bit too graphic. But you get the point I'm making, right? That's all it is. It's a gimmick and it doesn't last.
So again, I have to agree with DSP. The entire gore factor to MK is totally a gimmick. But at the beginning, he starts with people buy video games for a silly reason, but then just goes on to explain to you why some people enjoyed one game over another. So is this silly reason just enjoyment? I mean, when you really boil it down, because yes, at the time it was the gore, but still to this day, yes, the X-ray moves are cool and the fatalities are interesting and brutal. It's really just about how much enjoyment these people are getting out of the game, and they're not getting that enjoyment out of Street Fighter 6. Whether that's still because of the gore or because they just straight up don't like the actual fighting mechanics that are involved in Street Fighter 6. Because that was exactly my experience when I was much younger and being introduced to fighting games. I came to Mortal Kombat for the spectacle, but I stayed because I genuinely had fun playing the game and wanted to learn the mechanics that it did have, familiarize myself with the characters, and enjoy the atmosphere and world of Mortal Kombat, as strange as it is.
Yeah, it's cool to see all the fatalities, and once you've seen them all once, big deal, right? Like, who fucking cares? But you've seen them all once, so everyone runs and buys the new Mortal Kombat to be part of the group. Everyone's playing Mortal Kombat, and then within 2 months, they don't play it ever again. So that's the difference. It's more of a, oh, it's a hype game, go buy it because everyone else got it. Play it for a little bit, okay, it's stupid, and stop playing it.
He's acting as if buying a game to be part of a group is a bad thing just on principle. But what if that group is your friends and your peers from your real life that are getting together to play video games like after work or something, and you just want to play games and have fun with your friends? I understand that he doesn't know anything about having friends or enjoying somebody else's company, period, but other people do. In fact, human beings are fairly social creatures most of the time. He just seems to misunderstand this every single time he talks about games that he doesn't like, especially games like those memer streamer games. Yes, the reason that everybody is playing Lethal Company is not only because it's just kind of a fun game, you know, but because you can play it with your friends and have an experience with your friends, and that is most of the fun in and of itself. Now, that's not necessarily what happened with MK1, right? It is a fighting game. It's not something like Lethal Company or Among Us, right? But he never acknowledges this view at all. He always acts as if buying a game to be part of a group is always bad. DSP, why can't you let people just have fun playing the games that they want to play?
Street Fighter 6 is, oh, I bought it. Oh my god, the game's catchy. It's fun. I'm like a certain character. I'm going to go back. I'm going to learn. I'm going to play online. Maybe I'll go to a tournament. It's a little different, right? It's meant to be more of a serious game. So, that's all I got to say. It's that simple. It's quality versus hype. Mortal Kombat 1 always has the hype. Like, yeah, your game is not good. You did not put effort into your game. Mortal Kombat 1 is a totally phoned in, dialed in, whatever you want to say, cookie cutter version of Mortal Kombat. The only new thing they added was these assists, and they're not good. The game was a mess. I mean, it wasn't even programmed correctly. It took them 3 weeks to realize there's a game bug that on one side the character wasn't getting combos to land, and the other person always did. It was completely unbalanced. They fucked their whole game up at launch. But somehow we forgave them for that. It's like, it's supposed to be a competitive fighting game, and for 3 weeks, none of the results even mattered because the game was bugged, right?
The player 2 bug in MK1 is absolutely egregious and should have never have happened. But that's really just a symptom of modern gaming rather than an issue with NetherRealm Studios. I mean, you constantly seen in patch notes for online competitive games where they have fixed something that just wasn't working correctly. And sometimes it's something massive. Something like not taking into consideration armor when calculating damage being done. A very basic core mechanic of the game that needs to be patched because it's not working properly. That's just modern gaming at this point. The real solution to this problem, though, is to just not buy video games right when they come out. If you just wait a month or two, typically these problems get ironed out.
People need to stop with the hype. It's that simple. Mortal Kombat 1 was not worth as many sales as it got at all. It was actually a poor version. It was one out of all the versions of Mortal Kombat I have played in the last 15 years as a YouTuber, that was the worst one. Like, no exaggeration. There was no innovation, nothing of interest. The story sucked. They ruined the story of the franchise. The online play was terrible. They didn't try to make it interesting. They just barely gave effort. And that's sad.
And just like always, all of those same criticisms could be really just levied right back at you, DSP. Out of all of the gaming channels that I've seen on the internet, DSP Gaming is one of the worst I've ever seen. There's no innovation, nothing of interest, the jokes sucked, he's basically ruined comedy, the audience interaction is terrible, he doesn't try to be engaging, he barely gives effort, and that's sad. You see how easy that was for me to do, DSP? And it really goes without saying, but all of the things that he listed as negatives for MK1 just now are completely subjective and up to interpretation by the person playing the game. So again, the whole thing was meaningless and a huge waste of time. So thanks again, DSP.
You know, NetherRealm at one point was the company that every few years they were alternating Mortal Kombat Injustice, Mortal Kombat Injustice. And now there was a big dead time, and they just pump out another Mortal Kombat that's shitty. It's like, wow, they fucked this up. So I guess we'll have to see, but that's why. Being honest, Mortal Kombat will sell more based on height, and then immediately drop off while people are still playing Street Fighter 6 to this day, but it sold less. What are you going to do? Right?
Well, I guess you're gonna do the only thing that you really can do, DSP. You're gonna seethe and cope all over your streams in front of your audience. Of course, big ups to both Snort, Hogan, and Doody streams on this one. I appreciate both the clips, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Shout out to everybody who watched the video, especially if you made it this far. And a special big ups to all of my members. I appreciate you so much, you'll never know. Hopefully I'll catch all of you guys in the next video, but until then, make sure that you check out other detractor channels and dive deeper into that. Snort tags.